And good afternoon, and welcome to our first of the year Third Way Dialogue Chat. As you know, my name is Antjuan Seawright, and I'm happy to be returning back to Third Way as a senior visiting fellow. I want to personally thank all of you who joined us and followed us all throughout last year as we engaged with some of the most persuasive and influential leaders in our nation's history, in particular those who are serving in roles and capacities within the United States Congress. And this year will be no different. The only difference between this year and last year is this year is an election year. So that means all things politics, all time, and the work that Third Way continues to do will be critically important to saving this democracy. And Third Way could not do what it does without the help of so many of you all who are on this Zoom. And I'm just so personally thankful for your continued support. Today, as we elevate and celebrate the contributions of so many African Americans for what they've done to help stitch this country together. I'm so proud and I'm so thankful on the second day of February. It's 222 in 2022 to have probably one of the most younger and dynamic leaders within the House Democratic Caucus. Certainly, he is no stranger to the political scene. When he served on the city council, he was the first in New Orleans. He was the first African American to do so from that area. Same thing from the State House of Representatives in Louisiana, as well as from the State Senate. All three of those titles in which he was able to accumulate, he was the first African American, respectively, from the area. An Xavier graduate, MBA graduate, has had his hand and his feet around business and what that means for communities, in particular those communities that seem to be on the left out and left behind way. He is a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Incorporated. He is a husband, he's a father, but most importantly, I can tell you that Representative Troy Carter, who replaced my dear friend and my political brother, Cedric Richmond, in the United States Congress, is a trusted voice for Democrats all across this country. And I'm so proud that he is taking the time to join us here at Third Way. Representatives, thank you for your time.
Antjuan, thank you very much, man. I greatly appreciate this opportunity. Always good to be with you. Appreciate your leadership and your guidance through this new chapter. Always good to have people that understand the importance. People that are on the other side, if you will, who are not in the realm of elected office, but certainly play an incredible role as advocates. So I'm grateful for Third Way, grateful for you. Happy to be here today.
And shout out to my other big brother, Ike Spears, for making certain that we kept the wheels oiled in order to make this happen. Representative, I'll start with the basics. If you want to add some background color to things I may not have covered in my brief Sunday school introduction of you, I tried to give the top lines, but I know there's some middle and low lines about your service, your public service career, things that are important to you, and most importantly, talk about the district that you now represent in Louisiana.
Well, I think you did a very good job of highlighting. I've been in public life my entire adult life. Started working for then Mayor Sidney Bartholomew in his first term as mayor of New Orleans, and then shortly after that began my own elected career, having served in the City Council, House Representatives, and the Senate. Now serving in Congress and proud to succeed my very dear friend Cedric Richmond, who has made Louisiana and our country incredibly proud. Someone who did an outstanding job as a member of the House of Representatives of Louisiana, and certainly in his 10 years as a member of Congress serving the district that I now am blessed to serve, now serving as a trusted advisor, a senior advisor to the President of the United States of America. I am honored to follow in his footsteps. You got the career down. I've got two sons, and my wife is a brigadier general in the United States Army. I've got one son who is a senior at Xavier University in Louisiana, and another one who's a sophomore at Howard University here in the district. So it is kind of neat to be able to spend time with one son in Louisiana, the other son in Washington, and I'm honored to be a new member of Congress, when I was first running, when people would ask, what committee assignment do you think you will get? And I said, well, being among the very last to join the 117th Congress, I'll probably be getting coffee for senior members. But I got lucky and ended up getting significant assignments. Very pleased, particularly during this day and time, to be appointed to small business. And the issues facing small business people across the country, especially in light of COVID, but also in our challenged economies. There's someone to be there to fight for small businesses to make sure that they have a voice. And equally as important was my assignment to T&I, Transportation Infrastructure, arguably one of the most significant committees of the 117th Congress because of our massive infrastructure bill that we're fortunate enough to get through both chambers and ultimately get on the president's desk for signature. And now, of course, we are seeing the benefit. Louisiana alone will get some $7 to $8 billion of that pie. That will go directly to rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, creating opportunities for small and emerging businesses, minority-owned businesses, taking advantage of the opportunity to fix many issues that have been on the deferred maintenance list for so long. So it's quite rewarding to come in when I came in, to have an opportunity to weigh in on Build Back Better, although some have suggested is dead. I reject that notion. It may come back in different forms, but we're going to continue to fight for Build Back Better, as we will for voting rights and police reform, and continue pushing for those things that Americans are so desperately in need of. True reform and true opportunities to be a part of the mainstream, to create opportunities in business and industry while protecting the interest of communities. I'm not one that have ever suggested that we have to be so myopic that one has to supplant another. Coexistence is not a bad word. Working together is not a bad word. Getting things done so we have the kind of interests and concerns met where neighbors and people in their homes are safe while still protecting jobs and the environment are all things that are very important to me. So I think you did a very good job at giving a snapshot, and that's a little bit further touch to that, Antjuan. So thank you again.
Congressman, let's take the cover off the buffet table, if we will, on from a policy standpoint. You mentioned small business. I do want to lean in there because I think this administration has made certain that small business, in particular Black and brown businesses, receive their fair share of assistance and help. A very different turn, a very different pull from the last administration. Talk about your work on the committee and some of your priorities as a legislature in the United States Congress.
Well, one of the things that was very important to me coming right off the bat with small businesses is, when we had resource dollars during COVID, many of those dollars got eaten up rapidly by the larger businesses that have access to accountants and lawyers and consultants to help them get their paperwork done. So many of them were on the ready. As soon as the money was available, they jumped in the chute and got their share. Unfortunately, many of the small businesses that needed it as much, if not more, were kind of left on the sideline. So things that we're working on is making sure when additional tranches of money come out, or we find ourselves in similar situations, that small businesses will not have to compete with large or middle-sized businesses, that allocations are divided into appropriate sections. So a large business would compete with large businesses. Medium-sized businesses will compete with medium-sized businesses. Small businesses will compete with small businesses. So regardless of the time that you get to the party, you still have an opportunity to dance. And those are the kind of measures that seem pretty simple, but if someone doesn't bring it forward, it continues to be the case of the haves having access, getting resources, and those that don't have as much resource get no additional resources. So, that's an issue that's near and dear. I have a bill that we have introduced that's dubbed the Small Business Advocacy Improvement Act. It's a bipartisan bill that will make clear that SBA offices of advocacy has the authority to examine international economic data and represent small business interests in international discussions particularly in trade negotiations. LA2 has some of the most important ports in the U.S. That connect businesses here and abroad. So proud to co-lead this bill that will ensure small businesses have the opportunity of having someone fight for them on the global stage. It's those kind of measures that give us the opportunity to play, to be a part of the discussion. Another thing that was critically important with infrastructure bill's passage was the creation of a minority business development center at Southern University in my district in Louisiana, the first of its kind that is now permanently a part of the U.S. Department of Commerce, which will give small businesses the opportunity to have access to resources, to technical assistance, access to find financial resources, as well as bonding capacity. As you know, many small businesses fail because they don't have access to capital to keep moving. Many small businesses are put at disadvantage because they are forced to wait 60, 90, 120 days to be paid. Small business can't afford to have that kind of outlay. So we have to find ways to make sure that we create opportunities for lines of credit, for relationships with banks, for bonding capacity that's not onerous, that they can't compete, and opportunities where primes are made to pay their subs commensurate to when they're paid. Oftentimes, we know that subs are expected to take pennies on the dollar just to be paid. And in the time value of money, sometimes that makes better sense. But after work has been done, a person should be paid 100% of the work that they put in, not pennies on the dollar versus getting zero. So, having the opportunity to sit on small business gives us an opportunity to not only listen to small business interest, to interact with the SBA and those officials, but also to offer real life opportunities and examples of ways that we can help small businesses, which we know is the real backbone of our economy.
Congressman, when it comes to this massive consequential issue known as climate change, somehow or another, there's certain folks who think that the conversation only centers around a group of people who look a certain way. I look at your congressional district, I look at the state of Louisiana. I don't know an issue single-handedly that has probably hampered that state more than climate change and what it means. Can you put some background color to climate change and the impact it has had on Louisiana and on your district, but also what does the fight look like and what does it mean going forward? Because when you talk about small business and you talk about all of the things that you've been such a strong, steady voice for, climate change fits as a safety pin in all of that. If that pin pops, all of that goes away.
That's exactly right. And my district is one of those unique examples of a district that runs along the river in Louisiana, where the compilation of chemical plants are situated. Miles and miles and miles of chemical plants along the river parishes in my district, where you have many people that make a tough decision every day. Do I go to work and enjoy a living, or do I move away from this opportunity where I can work because I can't breathe? And people shouldn't have to make that decision. People should not have to choose to literally die for their jobs. And I have long been an advocate that we shouldn't make people choose. We know that business and industry is important to our economy. We understand the significance of oil and gas, even though we know that we are weaning ourselves off and we're trying to lessen the impact of fossil fuels on our economy and on our lives. But it's a gradual step to do it. It's not an overnight situation that allows us to do it. And in the meantime, as we wean off, we should make sure that there are proper safeguards, that people are safe in their communities, that people can breathe and they can live while enjoying their job, where school boards can enjoy the taxation from industry, where small businesses and small municipalities enjoy the taxation that comes from industry. But the necessity to make sure that we are properly managing, that we have proper oversight and governance, that the EPA is stepping in to make sure that we have the necessary monitoring systems in place, whether independent third-party monitoring, not the company monitoring themselves, to make sure that we're reducing or eliminating the emittents that go into the air that people are forced to breathe. We know that the science is pretty clear that in these areas where there are higher instances of cancer or other effects, can be directly attributed to harmful emittents that get into the air that ultimately get into people's lungs. But through careful monitoring, through new technology like carbon capture and other things, we're able to reduce those things, bring them into compliance. For those violators, have appropriate punishments for them to discourage people from taking shortcuts by improperly disposing of their waste, which ultimately becomes problems for the community. People deserve to be able to have a strong economy and have a workforce within industry that is safe and clean. I'm encouraged by our EPA administrator who recently released a list of action items that are being taken, a series of grants that are available for community activists to apply for that will provide air monitoring, air quality, making sure there's a better relationship between the community and the chemical plants. Heretofore, there's not been much communication. We have gone out of our way to try and forge conversations to allow people to have an interaction and allow the community to have a place at the table.
Congressman, you have been blessed enough to be in the Congress to vote on what I describe as the Great American Update, the bipartisan infrastructure bill in this country. You were also able to vote on what I had described in the media as the American Survival Act, which was the first piece of legislation passed by the Congress in order to keep this country together. Let's talk about the Great American Update. You're on the Transportation Committee. Your dear friend, the former mayor of New Orleans, Ms. Landry, is responsible for being the head and the face of the effort externally. Talk about why that bill was important globally, to why it was important for you. We know it was not just about ports, bridges, and roads. It was about broadband access, thanks to the Majority Whip, Jim Clyburn, and his continued effort. We also know that it was about literally fixing lead pipes in so many communities around this country, in particular Black and Brown, that have been experiencing that for a very long time. Because I know we're short on time, but in the Sunday school version, talk about why that legislation was so important for the country and for your district.
Well, when people talked about the infrastructure plan and we talked about it being cut to 1.2 trillion, I reminded people that it's a T, not a B. Mm-hmm. $1.2 trillion and the life-changing components that are within the infrastructure bill, much of which people are still peeling the onion back and realizing the rich resources that are there. As you mentioned, roads and bridges are one part of it, but we talk about in 2022, the necessity to have broadband. It's not a luxury; it is a necessity. Yet many parts of our country, and in Louisiana certainly, people can't afford it, or there simply isn't the fiber, the wire in place so they can have access to it. This bill provides that. We know that it's not just Detroit that suffered issue with their drinking water. It's an issue all over our country with people being forced to be exposed to lead. And we know what happens, and all the studies show that lead poisoning retards and deters the ability for our young people to have the kind of concentration and the other medical issues that are associated with it. So you think all the way around, from housing to infrastructure, roads and bridges, to the brick and mortar, to the ability to have broadband, the ability to rid our communities of lead pipes, which are damaging our young people's thought processes. All of those things are embedded, and we can go on and on. People that have WIC or SNAP or welfare of any sort have the ability to have reductions in their internet bill. So, there are a lot of components that really are life-changing. And so 1.2 trillion goes a long, long way. And with Build Back Better, we'll come back with the next wave of that on top of the ARP, which was passed previously. So there's a lot of great things that's happening, a lot of great things that's still to be done. but very proud of the actions of this Congress and this
You
White
know,
House.
Congressman, you say you're proud. One of the things we hear, and I'm gonna go from policy to politics real quick. One of the things you hear in the ecosystem, both wide and narrow, is that nothing's been done. You and I just did a little two-step about some of the many things that have been done. But let's switch gears to the politics of 2022. Let's start within our party. I oftentimes say, I repeat the Jay-Z quote that nobody wins when the family feuds. There seems to be step one of 2022. There seems to be a number of moderate Dems or people who disagree with other Democrats on issues in a different way being challenged in the primary. You say what to that first and foremost?
I say that the semantics of what you call a Democrat it gets into the weeds of having different ideas, but the overarching issue is we're all Democrats and we fight for the downtrodden. We fight for healthcare. We fight for economic development. We fight for inclusion in varying degrees. But as you said, when the family feuds, we all lose. I was progressive before progressive was called progressive. But when I ran, there were people who felt that I wasn't progressive enough. And it's like looking at someone and saying you're not black enough. What does that mean? You're not Democrat enough. You're not progressive enough. You're not black enough. You're not white enough. You're not gay enough. You're not straight enough. You're not. All of these mantras get to be kind of weird. The reality is we should centralize on fighting for people, fighting for the issues that are most important, and stop the infighting. Because we truly are the ones that are trying to make America, to broaden the base, to create economic opportunities, to create educational opportunities, to create fairness, so people are not judged by who they love, but because they love, and not because of where they go to school or the color of their skin or the religion that they practice. But because we're Americans, and we should make sure that we fight for fairness, anti-discrimination, fight against police brutality, give women the right to govern their own bodies, the opportunity for us to stand as one and reject the notion of all the isms that have divided us. God made one race and we fools made the rest. Never got around to making anybody any better than anybody else. He made a human race. And that's what Democrats fight for.
Congressman, if you ask those folks inside the DC bubble, they've counted out Democrats for 2022. What message do you say to us as a party, and what advice would you give about how we make certain that we protect this precious, fragile majority we have both in the House and the Senate?
Don't believe the hype. Just because statistics have shown that this has happened in the past doesn't mean it has to happen. Stay in the battle. Get out, vote, be as energized as ever, and don't believe the hype that because party change and House and Senate has these enormous shifts, doesn't mean it has to be that way. If you take a look and see what has happened in President Biden's administration's first year, more has happened in this first year than has happened in many administrations combined. Yet the chatter from the other side would dictate that things aren't going as well. We have to be as strong in our messaging, in our fierce defense of our policies, of doing what's right for the American people, and not believing the hype of what others say. Don't let others define who we are. Pay attention to what's going on. Stay involved, whether it's in your local community, state communities, or here at the nation's capital. We need activists at every level, and every one of you, we all are equipped with the ability to be an activist. We have the ability to be a megaphone to talk about what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong, but encourage people to stay engaged. We will maintain control of the House and Senate when the American people decide they're going to continue to vote in record numbers. Even though we've seen voter suppression efforts all over the country, we know that when we vote, we win. And we have to stay mindful of that and not allow the talking heads to discourage us and cause us to stay home. No matter how antiquated their suppression laws are, how much they try to get us to stay home, how difficult they may make it for us to get to the ballot box, Remember those who died so we'd have this precious right. And we should be fired up and energized every time there's an opportunity to vote.
Congressman, you're flirting with it, so I want to make sure we date this issue of voting rights. I oftentimes say it is the most consequential issue of our day, in the same way it was the most consequential issue of my sharecropper grandparents' day. Put some background color to how massive and how significant this issue of voting rights is, number one. And number two, how do you look at the clog we see in the wheel in the Senate that seems to not being able to churn and burn some of this legislation that could be booster cables for the American people to turn out to vote for us in November of this year?
If you look around the country, you see Texas, you see Florida, you see states all over, even my own state, Louisiana, where there are bills that are being filed to suppress the vote, votes that make it difficult for a person to do mail-in ballots, legislation that says you can't give a bottle of water or a snack to a person standing in a long line waiting to vote, voting suppression that suggests that people with disabilities can't get assistance to help them get to the ballot box or assistance with voting. Why is that good for America? Why is it good when you talk about suppressing the right to vote? We have put forward significant legislation that's now in the Senate. Unfortunately, because of the antiquated filibuster, we have not been able to get that done. Also, we've got Democratic senators who seem to be somewhat confused on the roles and policies that are good for the American people. And we're hoping every day that they will wake up and realize that we have this opportunity to defend and promote the right to vote for minorities, for African Americans are under attack now. What's going to be under attack next? Women? Do you want to go back to suffrage and stop and prevent women from voting or make it more difficult for them? Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And that's something that we have to remember. If you threaten me today, maybe it'll be you tomorrow. So the love you save may be your own, right? So we have to continue to fight for what's right in the way of voting rights, anti-suppression legislation, fight to make sure that people have access to the ballots. We continue to see the kind of ridiculous, sidewinding, backwards attempts to reduce participation of people. And I will tell you, my suspicion is this: we will prevail because we're not going to stop. We're going to continue to push legislation. We're going to continue to motivate voters. We're going to continue to call lies and the horrific thoughts of voter suppression, call it out at every front. But in the meantime, we're going to continue to motivate people to say the harder you try to stop me from voting, the more determined I am going to be to get to the ballot box. And that's where the community has to join us as policymakers, as lawmakers, and get sick and tired, as Fannie Lou Hamer said, get sick and tired of being sick and tired, get on the street, turn on the megaphones, and tell people you will not stop us from voting.
Congressman, when I was a little bit younger, I often say people died for our right to vote. I got a little older and realized that people were killed so that we can have the right to participate. And that's why we have to bust our noses and our mouths and our knees and feet to make certain that future generations do not suffer the suffocation that our parents and grandparents had and what they're trying to do for us. And so I appreciate your efforts on this. Fast forward the tape, because I know we have a few minutes left. It's February. We pause this month to celebrate and elevate the contributions of so many people, names we know, some we do not know, around this issue of African-American history and what it means. You and I both know all across this country, there are people who are trying to sanitize parts of our history in the name of something that doesn't really exist in the form of critical race theory. You say what to that, Congressman?
I say, it's ridiculous to think that somehow, if you don't talk about history, somehow it goes away. If you don't teach about history, somehow it goes away. If you think for 1 second that the horrors of the past, if it's painful for you to talk about what your ancestors did to my ancestors, imagine how painful it must be for me to have those facts hidden. And we often talk about the reality of if history is not studied, it is destined to be repeated. So the notion somehow that we can whitewash history and that the teaching of what happened in the past is flaming hate, no, it's just the opposite. To ignore what happened, rather it's slavery or the Holocaust. These are all things that must be studied so we never, ever repeat them. That we as a people learn from our mistakes, that we don't glorify them, we don't stick our heads in the sand and act as if they didn't happen. But if some had their way, they would erase history and they would have us believe that everything is fine, when in fact, everything hasn't been fine. And truth be told, everything still isn't fine. And we've come a very long way, but we still have a very long way to go. And we're fortunate to be able to have the gains that we've enjoyed because strong people of all races have stood up and said, let's do the right thing. And we have to continue to fight to do the right thing and snuff out those who would suggest that teaching about history is bad. Somehow that arguing that Black Lives Matter somehow is bad. Listen, if you say protect the whales because they're under threat, does that mean I don't care about giraffes? No, I care about all animals. I just know the whales are under attack. So we fight to save the whales. When we say Black Lives Matter, it's not that we don't care about all lives. Black lives are under attack. Therefore, we bring concentration to Black Lives Matter.
Congressman, speaking of lives mattering, policymakers matter. Black policymakers matter. You are in part of the breadth of the Congress and the country, the Congressional Black Caucus, as we celebrate and we think about the contributions of African Americans that have been made and those who are making contributions. You are walking Black history yourself. What does it mean to be a part of the Congressional Black Caucus in this inflection moment we are experiencing in history?
The Congressional Black Caucus, which is often referred to as the conscience of the Congress, justifiably so, because we serve as checks and balances within checks and balances. To make sure that we keep the consciousness of fairness in the forefront of our discussion, that we disallow the disenfranchisement or the ability of some to discriminate against others, to constantly remind this Congress, this White House, and every other White House, and every other Congress, and every other policy, and every other agency, that fairness has to be the order of the day. I'm proud to be a part of the Congressional Black Caucus, which is so incredibly led by Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, who is a fearless leader, an incredible leader that has done incredible work for all people. The Congressional Black Caucus, while it fights for and demonstrates the importance of uplifting the plight and the rights of African Americans, don't be mistaken. The Congressional Black Caucus fights for all people, fights for fairness across the board to make sure that all of God's children are given the opportunity to be treated fairly, regardless of whatever your background or whatever your difference may be. We see difference and diversity as strength. We don't see it as a weakness. And the Congressional Black Caucus has fought since its inception to be that voice. And I am so proud to be surrounded by so many incredibly talented members of the Congressional Black Caucus. So proud to serve with giants like Whip Jim Clyburn, who arguably is responsible for us having a Democratic president today because of his leadership, because of his wisdom, because of his ability to articulate and stand up and fight, moved people from a state of being not certain who they would vote for to a state of electing Joseph R. Biden to be our president. So proud to have the opportunity to serve with someone that has the intellect, the strength, the courage, and the leadership. And that's all born through this Congressional Black Caucus. And I can go on from Sheila Jackson Lee to G.K. Butterworth to Representative Cleaver and our incredible chairman of the January 6th committee, Benny Thompson, Maxine Waters, Now, these are all titans. These are people that have fought. Bobby Scott and there's just so many. I can go on and on. Every one of our members, in their own right, bring incredible strength and wisdom, and I'm proud to be associated with such an incredible body.
Congressman, the last question I ask you before you go, we oftentimes hear, those of us from the South like you and I, it takes a village to raise a child. In my line of work and in your line of work, we know it takes a village to keep and protect a majority. Why is the work that organizations like Third Way and so many others do on a daily basis so important for the sake of preserving this little experiment we call America?
Because you provide yet another voice. You provide yet another voice that gets into circles that we might not get into. Third Way serves an incredible role in that you are part of that megaphone, if you will, a part of the tentacles of society that allows us to continue to have the exchanges, to talk about what's happening, because oftentimes people are busy living, trying to live, making the mortgage, paying the rent, making sure that Junior has shoes, keeping the lights on. So when we have life coming at us fast, we don't always have the opportunity to be as informed. And us as policymakers don't always have the opportunity to reach places that you can reach. So I encourage you, and I thank you with my whole heart for doing what you do, because you don't have to. But stepping up, being a part of the process, being a part of the solution, working with the Congressional Black Caucus, working with communities, whether it's state or local, working with academia or working with clergy or neighborhoods means something. Because when we touch churches, churches touch lives. When we touch hospitals, hospitals touch lives. When we touch communities and schools and playgrounds and organizations, be they social or civic, we're educating and we're touching people. And that's what you do. So it would make our job so much more difficult if we didn't have people like you, Third Way and others who are staying engaged, asking the tough questions, holding us as well as others accountable. It's very much a we thing, not a me thing. We work in tandem, and it works really well. And the more we have you and others engaged, the better we govern.
My brother from another political mother, the Congressman from Louisiana's 2nd Congressional District, Representative Troy Carter. Congressman, we thank you for your leadership. We applaud you for your continued effort to move the ball forward as we inch closer towards perfection in this 200-plus-year-old union called America. We hope that you will stay engaged and stay involved. I want to thank your team, my brother Ike, and others on your team who make certain that today was possible. To all of you who have joined in from the Third Way community, I want to thank you, and we'll be back with you very, very soon with another special guest in the days to come. Take care.
God bless you. Thank you, brother. Enjoyed it.